What if I told you that the most famous entertainer who ever lived was also one of the most lonely, broken, and misunderstood people on the planet? We're talking about a man who held 39 Guinness World Records. A man whose album sold more copies than almost any other record in history. A man so magnetic that even after his death, he continued earning hundreds of millions of dollars a year, year after year. But here's the thing nobody tells you in the highlight reels. Behind every moonwalk, behind every sold-out stadium, behind every chart-topping hit, there was a story unraveling in slow motion. A story of abuse, addiction, isolation, and a kind of loneliness that most of us will never understand. Today, we're not here to celebrate the icon. We already know that guy. Today, we're going inside the parts of Michael Jackson's life that rarely make it into the documentaries. The parts that explain so much of what he became and why he died the way he did. Stay with me until the end, because this one goes deep. Let's go back to the beginning. August 29, 1958. Gary, Indiana, a steel town, a tough town, the kind of place where life doesn't hand you anything, you scratch for every inch. Michael Joe Jackson was born the 8th of 10 children into a family that was barely keeping its head above water financially. His mother, Catherine, was a deeply religious woman who played piano and clarinet. His father, Joseph Jackson, Joe, had dreams of being a musician himself, but those dreams had dried up. So he transferred everything, all that pressure, all that hunger, onto his kids. Now here's where it gets heavy. Joe Jackson has been described by his own children as a tyrant during rehearsals. We're talking about a man who would walk in with a belt, who would scream at them, humiliate them, threaten them if they missed a step or a note. Michael himself confirmed in interviews that his father would beat him if he made mistakes during practice. He said that sometimes the sight of his father would make him physically sick, literally nauseous with fear. Think about what that does to a child. You're 6 years old. Your job is supposed to be riding bikes and drawing pictures. Instead, you're rehearsing choreography for hours because if you mess up, there are real consequences. And Michael was 6 years old when Joe put him in the group. 6. He didn't ask to be in the spotlight. The spotlight was handed to him whether he wanted it or not. But here's the twist that people don't talk about enough. Despite the abuse, despite the fear, or maybe because of it, Michael Jackson was extraordinary. He had something that couldn't be taught, a natural gravity. You could put 10 kids on stage and your eye would find him every single time. The Jackson 5 started performing at local talent shows and clubs. And then in 1969, something big happened. Berry Gordy signed them to Motown Records. Their debut single, I Want You Back, hit #1. Then ABC. Then I'll Be There. 4 #1 singles from their first 4 releases. That almost never happens. Michael was 11 years old. 11, and he was already the main attraction. But while the world was falling in love with this smiling, dancing kid, the kid himself was quietly suffering. He'd later say that he cried himself to sleep many nights as a child, that he had no real friends his own age, that he never really had a childhood, not a real one. And that wound, that missing childhood, it never fully healed. It shaped almost every major decision he'd make for the rest of his life. Fast forward to the late 1970s. Michael is a young adult now, stepping out of the family shadow to build something on his own. In 1979, he dropped Off the Wall, a collaboration with the legendary Quincy Jones, and it was a massive hit. Over 20 million copies sold, 4 top 10 singles, a statement album that said, this isn't just a Jackson 5 kid anymore, this is something different. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared the world for what came next. In 1982, Michael Jackson released Thriller, and the world changed. We're talking about the best-selling album of all time. Somewhere between 66 and 70 million copies sold, and that's a conservative estimate. 7 singles, 7 of them became top 10 hits. 7, in one album, that's not a record, that's a different category of human achievement. Billie Jean, Beat It, be startin' something. And of course, the title track with that 14-minute music video that turned the whole concept of what a music video could be completely on its head. Then came the Grammy Awards in 1984. 8 Grammys in a single night, a record that stood for decades. And then February 1983, there's a moment that people who were alive for it still describe as electric. Michael Jackson performs Billie Jean on the Motown 25th anniversary special. He's wearing that sequin jacket and a single white glove. He sings the song beautifully. And then, right at that bridge, he slides backwards across the stage, and the moonwalk enters the world. The phones lit up across America. People who were watching it live said they actually jumped up from their couches. Jeffrey Daniel had actually shown Michael the move, inspired by popping techniques, but Michael refined it, perfected it, made it his. That night, he made it immortal. By the mid-1980s, Michael Jackson wasn't just a musician. He was a phenomenon, a cultural force, an icon in the truest sense of the word. Pepsi deals, endorsements, world tour, he was everywhere. But even at the very peak of all of this, even when the whole world was cheering his name, the cracks were forming underneath. Here's something I want you to think about seriously, because this part often gets turned into a punchline, and it shouldn't be. Michael Jackson suffered from vitiligo, a condition where the immune system attacks the pigment-producing cells in the skin, causing white patches to appear. It can spread unpredictably, and it's completely out of the person's control. Michael was reportedly diagnosed in the early 1980s, and if you look at his skin closely in photos from that era, you can actually see the early signs. Now, did he also have plastic surgery? Yes, he admitted to at least a couple of procedures on his nose, but the drastic changes in his skin color, that was vitiligo. He used makeup and later skin treatments to even out his appearance, not to become white, as the tabloids love to shout. His own autopsy confirmed the condition. But here's where the pain enters. Around the same time, he was also dealing with the physical aftermath of a Pepsi commercial shoot in 1984. His hair caught fire during filming. He suffered second-degree burns on his scalp. The surgery to repair his scalp led to chronic pain, and that pain required management. That's when the painkiller use began, not from recreational choice, from real, documented physical pain. But painkillers are painkillers, and the body doesn't care why you started taking them. It only knows that it wants more. Add to that the psychological weight he was carrying, the fear of his father, the isolation of fame, the insomnia that would plague him for decades, the anxiety of always being watched and judged. And you start to understand how a man could slowly, quietly fall into dependency. He couldn't sleep, genuinely couldn't, for months at a time. He once described lying in bed, completely exhausted, staring at the ceiling with his mind racing and his body refusing to rest. That kind of chronic insomnia is its own form of torture. In 1988, Michael spent $17 million building a world unlike anything that had ever existed on private property. He called it Neverland Ranch, sitting on about 2,700 acres in Santa Barbara County, California. There was a full amusement park, a Ferris wheel, a carousel, bumper cars, a private zoo with elephants, giraffes, chimpanzees, including the famous Bubbles, a movie theater, a train that ran through the property, flower gardens designed to look like they were from a fairy tale. On the surface, you might look at this and say, this is a grown adult who is acting like a child. But I'd ask you to consider something else. This was a grown adult who never got to be a child, who spent his formative years in rehearsal rooms and recording studios instead of playgrounds, who learned the choreography of performance before he learned how to simply play. Neverland wasn't eccentric. Neverland was a wound. It was Michael trying, however imperfectly, to build the childhood he was robbed of. He wanted to create a place where children could come and just be kids, in a way he never could. But Neverland also became the center of the darkest chapter of his life. In 1993, 13-year-old Jordan Chandler accused Michael Jackson of sexual abuse. The accusations were devastating. Michael denied everything. The case was eventually settled out of court for a reported $23 million, which his supporters argued proved nothing, and his critics argued proved everything. Then in 2003, a decade later, another accuser came forward. This time, there was a criminal trial. It lasted months. The whole world was watching. In June 2005, Michael Jackson was acquitted on all 14 counts. Not guilty officially, but the damage to his reputation was permanent. The media had already decided. The tabloids had already done their work. And Michael, who had been one of the most loved human beings on the planet, was now viewed with suspicion by millions of people who had once adored him. He retreated, he left America. He took his children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket and moved to Bahrain, then Ireland, then Las Vegas. He was unmoored, financially strained. Neverland was shuttered. He had to sell portions of it to cover debts. The king of pop was in exile. By 2009, something shifted. Michael Jackson announced a comeback. Not just a small tour, a massive, high-stakes 50-show residency at the O2 Arena in London called This Is It. The tickets sold out in minutes. Over 1 million tickets gone in a single day. People who had written him off, who had turned on him, who hadn't bought a Michael Jackson album in years, they were camping outside ticket offices overnight. The hunger for him was still there. It had never really left. Rehearsal footage that was later released shows him in incredible form. Fluid, sharp, commanding. He looked like he still had it, like whatever the years had taken, the music had given back. People who were in those rehearsals said it was magic. But behind the scenes, things were more fragile than they appeared. Michael was not sleeping. He was relying on increasingly powerful medications just to get a few hours of rest each night. The insomnia that had haunted him for decades was now at a crisis level. His doctors, specifically his personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, had been administering propofol, a powerful hospital-grade anesthetic, to help him sleep. At home, in a bedroom, without the equipment or safeguards that are standard in a medical facility when the drug is used. On June 25, 2009, Michael Jackson was given propofol by Dr. Murray. He went into cardiac arrest. He was rushed to UCLA Medical Center, where doctors worked for over an hour trying to revive him. But it was too late. Michael Jackson was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. He was 50 years old. The official cause of death: acute propofol and benzodiazepine intoxication. Dr. Conrad Murray was later convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 4 years in prison. The news broke while people across the world were at work, at school, going about ordinary Tuesday afternoons, and it stopped everything. Twitter, still young at the time, crashed. CNN's website went down under the traffic. The Google searches were so intense that the company thought it was under a cyber attack. His memorial service at the Staples Center in Los Angeles was watched by an estimated 31 million people in the United States alone. Globally, the numbers were staggering. His body was interred at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Here's what's strange and maybe beautiful about Michael Jackson's legacy: time hasn't diminished it. If anything, it keeps growing. From 2013 to 2023, he was consistently ranked among the highest-earning deceased celebrities in the world, bringing in anywhere from $75 to over $400 million in some years. His music streams keep climbing. New generations keep discovering Thriller for the first time and losing their minds over it. His influence on pop, on dance, on music videos, on stage performance, it's everywhere, even in artists who maybe don't even know they were shaped by him. But I think the thing that makes Michael Jackson's story so haunting, and why we keep coming back to it, is that it's not just a success story. It's not just a rise and fall story. It's something more complicated and more human than either of those. It's a story about what happens when extraordinary talent meets extraordinary pain. When a child is pushed beyond what children should carry. When fame becomes a cage instead of a reward. When the person the world fell in love with never really had the chance to figure out who they were without a stage. Michael Jackson gave the world an immense gift, and the world, for much of his life, gave him spectacle in return. Adoration and scrutiny in equal measure. Love and judgment without much in between. Was he perfect? No. Was he complicated? Absolutely. But his story, the full story, not just the highlight reel, not just the tabloid version, it deserves to be understood. Not just celebrated, understood. And maybe that's the real reason we keep talking about him, because there's still so much to understand. If this video made you think, made you see something differently, drop a comment below. Tell me, what part of Michael Jackson's story hits you the hardest? I read every single one. And if you want more deep dives like this, stories behind the stories of the biggest names who ever lived, subscribe and hit that bell. We drop new videos every week, and trust me, they go places most channels won't. Until next time, keep asking questions. The real story is always worth finding.